Welcome back, y'all. It's me, Mama King, and I'm here for another reading of The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth, y'all. And I prayed and just popped open the book to read a chapter. I did start a reading this one, but I haven't finished it. I haven't completed it, so I will complete it as I read it right now, in the moment. The title of this, of course, The Divine Homosexual Family. And I was like, okay, this will be interesting. But the more I read it, the more I understood. Okay, so hopefully your understanding will extend past the 3D and past the present time. Okay, so here we go. In January 1977, the Pope announced that women could never be priests in the Catholic Church. The reason given was that Christ is a male, and his priests must be imitations of him. In the Netherlands, on May 13, 1985, Pope John II reiterated the Vatican's position on women to a large crowd of less than enthusiastic Hollanders. Women will never be allowed in the Catholic priesthood, he said. Liberal Protestant denominations now allow women ministers, and conservative Jewish leaders have just opened the way for women rabbis in their synagogues. But among Catholics, as among conservative Christian churches, such as the Mormons and Orthodox Jews, women are still not considered the proper sex to serve as sacred ministers or interpreters of the biblical God. The highest a woman can go in the Catholic hierarchy is deaconess, a role always subordinate to the male priest. As far as the Vatican is concerned, a priestly relation with the male Christ can only be enjoyed by another male. Both of them served humbly by convent-trained nuns as a kind of holy harem of the patriarchal spirit. Interesting. The liberal egalitarianism of the other Christian and Jewish denominations, where women ministers and rabbis are now accepted, is a very recent occurrence. It came about only via feminism and the pressure of Christian and Jewish women for spiritual acknowledgement by their respective faiths. For most of the millennia of Christian and Jewish history, the biblical God Yahweh and his immaculately begotten Son, why can't I say that word? Immaculate conception, right? That's how the begotten Son, Christ, have always and only been presented at the altar by a male. Okay. Quite often, these males have worn skirts, and always, in all times, they have been the givers and upholders of dogmatic laws regarding women. Laws telling women how to dress, how to move, how to behave, how to relate to our bodies, how to reproduce, when to reproduce, how to have sexual activities, when to have sexual activities, how to relate to our menstrual periods and our childbirths and our afterbirths, how to bow our heads, cover our hair, keep our eyes modestly averted, how in general to be pliant and submissive and unquestioning handmaidens in the holy back halls, kitchens, and bedrooms of the Lord. Indeed, this strange urge of holy men of all patriarchal denominations to stand there wearing skirts, giving sermons to the world's genuine females on what it really means to be a woman, is a propensity that needs deep pondering. Nonetheless, it has been the history of the male god religions. What needs deeper pondering by all of us is why women continue today to plead for egalitarian respect in reactionary churches that clearly now and historically have no interest in women as anything but followers and servants. The Catholic Church's male hierarchy does not need a women priest, and dismisses the very idea with celibate contempt. But the Catholic Church needs women. Wherever the church exists, it is millions and millions of female believers, low-paid, teaching nuns, volunteer women parishioners, catechized, I hope I said that right. I practiced it. Catechized mothers catechizing their children who keep the Catholic Church alive. Okay. In all Christian churches, until very recently, this was the traditional case. Women's natural religious impulse and capacity has kept patriarchal churches in business for so long. The female gift for spirituality, into which under patriarchy we pour so much repressed sexual energy, is used and turned against us by the male hierarchies of the male God churches. They cleverly keep women on our knees, scrubbing and scrutinizing the sacred floor, while they, a few select princes of the churches, rise upward in lofty clouds of worldly power and luxury. Religious women think they are worshiping God. In truth, under patriarchal religion, women believers exist only to service and inflate the institutionally ordained egos of very mortal men. I was going to drop my mic there for a second, but no, let me hold on. I got something else to say. On October 7th, 1984, 24 American nuns were listed as signers of a public statement printed in the New York Times. The statement was headlined, "A diversity of opinions regarding abortion exists among committed Catholics." American nuns in the past few decades have been at the forefront of the social action for change, in particular regarding women's rights to control our reproductive functions, a right supported by a majority of American Catholics. It would seem American nuns have been frequently willing to oppose or challenge the Vatican and the conservative American Catholic hierarchy. Sisters of Mercy nuns, who direct the second largest hospital chain in the country, wanted to allow sterilization and tubal ligation in their hospitals, many of which are in isolated, traditional bound areas where women have no birth control options. The Vatican and a conference of U.S. bishops forced the Sisters of Mercy, under threat of dismissal from their jobs, to sign statements disavowing all surgical methods of sterilization. The Catholic hierarchy, like all consciously patriarchal power institutions, very much needs to maintain control over female reproduction. They won't allow sterilization or birth control. They definitely oppose abortion. A large number of American and European Catholic lay people disagree with the Vatican on all these issues, and the American nuns have been heroically responsive to what they perceive as a desperate and legitimate need on the part of women to control the number of children we have. So the American nuns signed the New York Times paid statement, which at its most radical simply pointed out that even many Catholic theologians acknowledge that abortion can be a moral choice in specific circumstances. The statement was signed by many prominent Catholics, including 2 priests, in addition to the 24 nuns. How did the Vatican respond? It threatened to expel the nuns from their religious communities if they refused to recant. What this dismissal means to these women, most of whom are over 40 and have given their lives to the church, is a loss of home, a loss of community, a loss of livelihood, and a loss of pensions. The nuns were not even informed of this threat of severe punishment in advance. The orders came abruptly from their supervisors. A few of the nuns heard the news on the radio via a Vatican leak to the press. before they even had a chance to be informed by their supervisors. In the words of one of the inquisitors or inquisitioners, Archbishop Jerome Hamer, head of the church's Sacred Congregation for Religious and Secular Institutes, which issued the official church statement against the nuns. The nuns were seriously lacking in religious submission of will and mind to the magisterium. The two priests involved recanted. The 24 heroic nuns to this date have not. In the words of theologian Rosemary R. Ruthier, I'm gonna say her name right. It's Ruether, Ruther, who was one of the statement's signers. Okay. The conservative bishops in Curia were enraged that nuns would sign such a statement, especially that celibate women were involved in an issue that shouldn't affect them. This Curia can't stand the support of celibate women for women who have sex. So the 24 nuns, in Ruthier's opinion, are among the best and the brightest in the American church. Some have national reputations for their organizational work for Central America, women's and gay rights. Some hold PhDs from Yale, Harvard, and the University of Chicago. Some are theology teachers or authors of books on women's roles in the church. They were zapped by the Catholic male hierarchy with no respect for their accomplishments. However, something like an enraged husband kicking out a disobedient wife, some of the nuns felt the Vatican's threats and mode of threatening constituted psychological rape. Under the Vatican II, or the Second Vatican, I guess, that's what it says, Vatican with two Roman, the number 2. There were great liberalizations not only in the relation between the church and the poor and in the area of social reform, but also in the customs and rules of the religious life within the church. Nuns and many priests came out socially, involving themselves passionately in radical issues, e.g., the anti-war movement, anti-nukes, Central America, women's rights. Nuns left their imprisoning habits and became strong crusaders for social justice. Under Pope John Paul II, the church hierarchy has been attempting to break and reverse this liberalizing direction, and in particular to get the uppity nuns back under absolute conservative male control. The media has focused on the most obvious Vatican backlash against the nuns, the attempt to force them back into their religious habits, the long, thick costumes of constriction and submission. But this back to the habits movement is only symbolic of something deeper. All habits are. In Ruthier's informed opinion, the Roman Catholic Curia is maneuvering back to the top-down monarchical organization of pre-Vatican II days, in which all power and authority is at the top and all submission and obedience is at the bottom. In such a hierarchical scheme, the totally subordinate position of Catholic nuns is critical. In Ruthier's words, they are at the bottom of the chain of command, but have the essential role of passing on commands to the laity, as mothers to children. The burning question remains, why do women continue to give our gifts of spiritual devotion, of impassioned energy, of mental brightness, of profound social concern to male-dominated and male-defined religious institutions, which are based structurally and ideologically on a searing contempt and hatred for women? Why do women continue to give our physical endurance and biological endowment to patriarchal churches which exist ontologically and practically by attempting to dominate and control human female reproduction like a bunch of cattle breeders controlling the fertility of their cattle? What would happen today if all the millions of religiously active women on earth just walked out of their patriarchal churches, just left them flat. Better and braver and wiser to take out female blood energy and brain power and build our own church within it, making sacred our own experience of oneness within the mother, between each other, and within ourselves. After 2 or 3 millennia of serving a male godhead and male priesthoods in devotion and submission, could women ever take themselves seriously enough to serve the sacredness of ourselves, of each other, of the earth, and its holy wild creatures? No study has been made of the effect of a male godhead on the intimate beliefs and experiences of women. Traditionally, nuns were seen as the virginal brides of Christ, serving a purely disembodied sex role in the Catholic Church. The nuns also functioned as glorified housewives, polishing the church silver, embroidering altar cloths and vestments, always the humble handmaidens and under the ultimate authority of father, confessors, and male priests, serving a male God and his son, a son who had said to his mother, "Woman, what do I have to do with thee?" In earlier centuries, where all the options for women were terrible, it was often a liberation for a creative, independent woman to enter a cloister instead of being forced into what usually amounted to brutal marriage and eternal childbearing. Many of the great women artists and poets of the Middle Ages and Renaissance were nuns, living in all-women environments with freedom and time to think, read, write, and create. In the early Celtic Church of Ireland especially, many of the nunneries were communities of druidic priestesses in drag, still mixing magic spells in their pagan worship of the goddess bride with their daily Christian duties. As Mallory told us in Morte d'Arthur, Morgan Le Fay was not married but put to school in a nunnery where she became a great mistress of magic. Convent and coven are the same word, after all. Doubtless convent and coven are the same word, after all. Doubtless, the psychological influence of these witch nunneries contributed to the atmospheric survival of the goddess in Ireland. According to folklorist Lewis Spence, as late as 1850, the Irish folk still worshipped her, regardless of the Catholic priesthood. At the Well of St. Declan, Ardmore, County Waterford, masses of people assembled annually on December 22nd, crawled beneath a hollowed stone, and then drank of the well. It was surmounted by the image of a female figure, which is described as being like the pictures of Kali, the black goddess of Hindustan. The Catholic priest actually whipped the folk away from the spot, but to no purpose. As Kali and Kaliik are the same goddess after all, the whips of the priest can never turn what was into what was not, nor can failure of memory. So the Christian Trinity has been dubbed the divine homosexual family. It consists of the all-loving Father, his immaculately conceived Son, and an all-male priesthood who live in celibacy among Catholics and among all Christians, serve in some strange way as male brides to the Father Church. When Christians want to blame their religion for corruption and error, they usually refer to it as the Mother Church, making sure the Father and his Son are kept free of all blame for her material failures. But modern Christians do not know, however, that well into the early Middle Ages, the Holy Ghost of the Trinity was seen as female by the people, another relic of goddess worship. A crime against the Holy Ghost is, in Christian doctrine, the only unforgivable sin. This continues the pagan matriarchal tradition that matricide is a crime without forgiveness. Mary, the only female now left on this divine scene, has nothing of the primal creatrix about her. She is a mere lowly mortal woman, lifted up by Yahweh's divinely disembodied attention, impregnated by it, in fact, without ever seeing or touching the man, to produce a son for the Heavenly Father. Supposedly, Mary is impregnated by the Holy Spirit. This is interesting if we interpret this fertilizing ghost, this fertilizing ghost as the remnants of the Great Mother. Oh, okay. So in a way, it makes sense. If you know, you know. The impregnation of Mary echoes all the classic patriarchal myths of mortal women being implanted by more or less force with the seed of the sun god. There's that force again, right? In all the other myths, however, there is a fleshly contact between God and mortal, and something that could be called sex or rape. In the New Testament tale, there is no sex whatsoever. and it is to a divine absence that Mary acquiesces with vapid humility, an absence that uses her without even having to touch her. And Mary, wow. See how God uses how the goddess uses the foolishness of man to hide those secrets, okay? An absence that uses her without even having to touch her. And Mary, in our eyes, does not even gain the simple strength of struggling or choosing. She has no identity except as passive acquiescence to an absence. And this is how Christ is conceived. Conceived. Is he conceived? Was he conceived or was he conceived? He was conceived in the mind. The mortal mind. This is how Christ is conceived in both his physical conception and in our conceptions of him. It is all so fastidious, so non-textural, so cerebral and unreal, so bordering on the sexually pathological, in fact. The messy femaleness of Mary is dealt with by pretending it is not there. And this has been the fate of female sexuality under Christianity. Okay. It is simply not there. You got to cover everything up and make sure you don't tempt nobody. It is a story of disembodied alienation and non-identity that stretches from the Virgin Mary of the New Testament to the modern story of O, in which a woman supposedly achieves complete sexual gratification by giving over her body wholly to male control while she remains anonymous, without identity or passionate being, just not there. O is a 20th century incarnation of Mary, and both an essentially anti-sexual cultural mind deals with feminine sexuality by using it without encountering it. For this was how Jesus Christ was conceived, and thus it becomes a major though distorted mode of eroticism in Christian culture. The faceless O undergoes daily sexual self-sacrifice and mutilation on the altar of a phallic God, just as the archetype Mary undergoes lifelong sacrifice of active self-mutilation of her conscious identity on the altar of Yahweh and Christ. For both women, the whole purpose of existence is self-obliteration through the body, via the perpetual machine of sex or the perpetual machine of maternity. Mary and O are bookends enclosing the history of women's lives under patriarchal religion. In their stories, they act out an alienation that is personal, social, mythic, cosmic, and total. Mary forgoes sexual consciousness, sexual pleasure, physical prowess, economic and intellectual power, cosmic risks, the ontological and evolutionary adventure of creating one's identity. She gives up her whole range of natural and magic potential in order to become a good mother for her divine son. This is the beginning and end of her meaning as a human being, just as O's whole meaning is as a kind of sensational blob, a mass of flesh that exists to have things done to it The biblical definition of a good woman is one who sacrifices herself completely to the needs and demands of others, particularly male others, while asking nothing for herself. This good woman is essentially the same, whether she dwells with faithless humility in the house of the Lord or with anonymous masochism, anonymous masochism. Hold on. Why I can't pronounce this word?
Masochism.
Yeah, what?
Masochism.
Masochism. It's probably foreign to me for that reason. Okay, so with anonymous masochism in the private rooms of the sadist. S&M, that's what it is. I know what it is in my mind. Just the tongue's not matching. Anyway, let's continue, y'all. Under patriarchal religion, maleness is made. Let me make sure I'm recording. Yeah, I'm recording. Under patriarchal religion, maleness is made, invented, mass-produced, while femaleness is unmade, devolved, extincted. For over 2,000 years, Western biblicized women have been undergoing conditioning out of our natural powers and wisdoms. We grow up learning to disregard the effects of our own rhythms, which are cyclic like the moons, the tides, and the seasons. We learn the habits of ignoring them, denying them, trying to forget or overcome them as we live under the rule of the man, without and within, who conceives of time as something that can be ordered and processed in mental mechanical categories, regardless of the body's or the earth's phases. In this sense, all Western culture is built on ideal male homosexuality, the classic patriarchal institutions of the military, the hierarchic, centralized governments, the academic, medical, and the legal professions, as well as the priesthoods of the various biblically derived denominations, all being built around the male body and its relation to other males, and very explicitly to the exclusion of women's bodies, cycles, needs, and capacities. When James Watt became head of the U.S. Department of the Interior under Ronald Reagan's first administration, the department's stationery showed a few buffaloes standing on the left side of the paper, gazing eastward. Watt, a born-again charismatic Christian, had the stationery redone so that the buffalo were standing on the right side, gazing toward the west. Watt knew intuitively and doctrinally that the right side is of the Father, as well as neoconservative politics and free enterprise economics. Christianity is a dextral religion in all its aspects. The sign of the cross is made with the right hand, as is the benediction. Jesus also raises his right hand in blessing, in paintings, and in heaven. He sits on the right hand of the Father. Any blessing made sinisterly with the left hand is seen by Christians as blasphemy, part of the demon worship. The left side represents not only the social, political, economic left, but also the side of the communal mother, or in the case of the Interior Department stationery, communal buffalo. Watt was speaking from this same right-wing perspective when he condemned Native American tribal life as socialistic, i.e., it is a communally oriented life, reverent of the earth, and is thus seen by Watt as left-wing. American Indians walk and dream on the side of the mother. In the iconography, hold on. Don't y'all laugh. Give me a second. I got it. Iconography. Okay. In the iconography of Christian patriotism, all true Americans must be right-handed, right-wing, father-dominated, and physically male. Anything vaguely communal, leftish, and mother-dominated is viewed as sinister by the patriots, and patri means father. The female body, in other words, is politically subversive or has a lurkingly treasonous potential. All patriarchy is structured, always, in militant reaction to this potential. In ancient matriarchal society, man stood always in the relation of son to the mother. He could become divine. He did become divine by being born out of God, the mother, by undergoing the lunar process, the twin world of the moon god, experiencing both waxing and waning, cosmic dissolution, as well as cosmic union. In this way, his individual ego would transcend arrogance and exploitativeness, being exploitive, and become truly wise. All the ancient male heroes, even such a one as Gilgamesh of Sumer in Babylon, who defies the great goddess Inanna Ishtar and is cursed by her, receive their wonderful beauty, strength, and creative destructive restlessness from their mothers, forms of the goddess. Their mortality comes from their human fathers, but it has no connotations of fleshly sin, guilt, or punishment. It is simply death in the great round of life. Gilgamesh, like his Babylonian counterpart Marduk, the son of the sun, was given the task of overcoming and slaying the Great Mother in her form as cosmic dragon. But Gilgamesh is just at the beginning of patriarchy. Unlike the one-dimensional superheroes of later times, he still retains some of the sensitivity, wisdom, bisexual wholeness of the ancient matriarchy. He feels and acknowledges fear and doubt. He repeats over and over that he must not bring them harm or sorrow to his mother. He is depicted as often cowardly. He loves another man, and he fails in his struggle to become immortal. Gilgamesh is told starkly and truly that everything born must die. Otherwise, there can be no magic, life, or new beginnings. Man cannot conquer immortality by tricks, gimmicks, aggressive gameplays, or armed warfare. He can only realize immortality by becoming whole. In the Gilgamesh epic of 4,000 years ago, the goddess of birth, death, and rebirth had not yet been subdued. She still lived as a natural process of wisdom in human minds and in evolutionary human feelings, toured in evolving universe. The heroes of our present age, though, are something else. They are Superman, Bionic Man, James Bond, the Terminator, Rambo. They are the one-dimensional cartoon men of children's comics and TV. These 20th century superheroes are fiendishly skilled in one specialty, always involving a lot of noisy smashing and silent spying, and absolutely stupid in all other ways. They don't need profound human intelligence. They have machines, all presented as sex symbols for the masses. They are all eerily asexual and misogynistic. Don't y'all just love my... They are all just too pure, too patriarchic. They are all eerily asexual and misogynistic. They are all just too pure, too patriotic, too damn busy, too damn dangerous, or moving too fast for one woman, or any woman. Their primary sensual relationship is with their machinery. The only wildness about them, thanks to the speed of the light media, cinema, television, magazine, photography, is embodied in man-made objects, usually of shining metal. The magic swift gun, the magic swift car, the numinous technologies of spying, capture, and death, these are alive and wild. Everything else surrounding our heroes is dead meat. Clothed in steel, never born of a mother, the cartoon heroes are true products of huge metalopolis. Yeah. Metalopolis. Hold on, I gotta look that up. What the heck is that? See, okay, I looked the word up and it's not there. It says it doesn't exist, but it says metalopolises. But the word should be megalopolis. Megalopolis. Megalopolises. A large city. But I wonder why the spelling changed or if that was a mistake. I don't know. It could be. It could be a misprint. Typo. Okay. Well, anyway, that's a very large city, a thickly populated region centering in a metropolis or embracing several. Okay, there's a metropolises. Okay. So it's just a revamp of the word. Skyscraping phalluses and calculator minds that click and tick like bombs. All right, let me reread that. Clothed in steel, never born of a mother, the cartoon heroes are true products of a huge megalopolis, yep, big city. Skyscraping phalluses, interesting, and calculator minds that click and tick like bombs. There is not a tree or an ecstasy or a moon in sight. Some variation of bionic man is the ultimate 20th century vision. Owing his life not to nature but to man-made parts, which I grew up watching that show too, which are far superior to the original body he got from his mother. And he can be reborn with a screwdriver. There was also a bionic woman. So this humanoid superhero is as much a product of pure male ideal homosexuality as his prototype, Christ. In Mary, especially within the Catholic Church, the goddess for the first time in history bows down to worship male gods as creators of life. The Christian religion, a transverticism of the spirit, has from the beginning co-opted female experience, taking the victory and raw energy out of it, leaving us only an insipid view of our female selves. Christianity distorts the natural birth process into a grotesque and unnatural story of birth through the male, who, twisted in this artificial creation, becomes a sadomasochistic I almost said it. Sadomasochistic symbol of arbitrary power and empty submission. For the whole thing centers around birth, the primeval mystery and terror and blood right in which women struggle alone to create and triumph within the vast unknown. Christianity for 2,000 years has gained its energy by co-opting and distorting this experience, this fact, these symbols. For while maternal suffering is unconditional, since it is ontologically inevitable, the suffering Christ is blackmail, a wretched and manipulative appeasement to a cruel, manipulative, and jealous Father God. Mary is wife, mother, and child to the same male power figure. She is utterly meek, abject, passive. In her, the ancient power of the goddess is captured, chained, used, cannibalized, metaphysically cannibalized. And Ty Grace Atkinson's critical phrase, domesticated and tranquilized. It is no accident that Mary is portrayed as giving birth in tranquility and bliss as a reward for her asexuality and total submission, thus redeeming the crime of Eve. Oh boy, a total mind screw. So while Christ, her son, takes on the suffering and dramatic childbearing role of the mother, for he twists on the cross in labor to give birth to a redeemed human race, pierced by a soldier's sword, blood and water pour from his body, exactly as from a woman in childbirth. The figure displayed on the crucifix in Catholic churches, particularly, is a male parody of the female experience, of menstrual bleeding, of childbirth, of ontological physical suffering for the human race. But while Christ co-opts this female experience into his own power and glory, women who really do these things have been forced to hide the signs of our bleeding and childhood crucifixions as unclean processes and badges of corruption, inferiority, and shame. The deified male martyr flaunts his sacrifice everywhere, and we are supposed to bow down to it. Women, the real thing, are required by decency to hide our messiness out of sight. Oh, boy, that was deep. All right. In the making of the English working class, E.P. Thompson describes how, among the Methodist congregations of the 19th century, Christ's wounds were spoken of in a highly ecstatic, sexual, masochistic, sadistic language. His bleeding body was unconsciously identified. Thompson thinks with the female body role under patriarchy, long-suffering, sacrificial, the erotic, passive object of male frustrations and brutality. In Labyrinth of Solitude, Octavio Paz explores modern sadism and torture as extreme macho attempts to get revenge against feminine hermeticism, female hermeticism, against passive female otherness, a desperate attempt to obtain a response from a body we feel is insensible. But the female role of insensate, passive victim body is just that, a role. A role inculcated. Inculcated. I gotta look that up because I don't even know what it means. Hey, give me a second.
Inculcate.
Inculcate. It's a verb, a transitive verb to teach and impress by frequent repetitions or admonitions. Oh, like, what's his name? Umar Johnson. A role inculcated, enforced, and prolonged by a patriarchal religion, which must keep women numb and silent while its male god, Christ, acts out a female role. The erotic, dramatic role of bleeding and childbirth. But Christ as a transvestite or female imitations sacrifice to an asexual and jealous Father God represents unbearable distortion. It is God itself in this twisted person of Christ who is maddeningly alien and alienating, ontologically insensate, and eerily other. The entire world, the entire universe is eerily other, and the sadism and torture increases daily. Crazed men beating otherness into bloody pulp. In such a world where torture and brutality or persistent threats of torture and brutality constitute daily facts of life for a majority of people, sadomasochism or SM has become a game for some people. The game is played by American heterosexuals, lesbians, gay men, and bisexuals. SM is seriously justified or rationalized by its participants as one, an activity that frees people from sex roles by allowing them to exchange roles and experience the other, and two, a means of learning about power, of acquiring power, and of understanding power relationships. On the first count, SM advocates the advocates of S&M assume wrongly, as many feminists have pointed out, that torturer and victim roles are somehow ontologically rather than culturally derived, and that therefore by experiencing both roles and by exchanging them in role play, we can then learn something about our ontological selves, including our sexual selves as female and male. In fact, torturer and victim roles do not represent, respectively, the ontological male or the ontological female. Playing out and exchanging these roles teaches us nothing about who we are. Rather, it teaches us only about the roles a culture has imposed on us for several thousand years as a psychological, political means of confusing, co-opting, and repressing our ontological energies. Surely the major and political traversity of S&M's activity and its rationalizations Right, and its rationalizations lies in its second claim that it seriously pretends to be telling us something about power relationships. This is just mind blowing to me, y'all. Surely the whole monstrous point about power relationships is their involuntary nature. That part. The torture victim does not volunteer for the torture experience, nor does the torturer agree to stop the procedure upon request. Power is defined and determined solely by the fact that it can be inflicted by the will of one against the will of another. But SM advocates insist their activities are based on mutual agreement, and that this mutual agreement can teach us something about the power relationships. Such an argument totters horribly on the edge of suggesting all torture is chosen, and that all torturers are simply giving the victims the experience they really desire. The obscenity of SM in a political context is that the game players can get up and walk away from the game of pain, while real victims of real torture, i.e., of real power relationships, cannot get up and walk away. What we learn from one context, voluntary S&M, cannot in any way be transferred over to understand the other context, power relationships in the real world. SM teaches us nothing about power. It teaches us only about certain forms of game playing behavior in the West, and especially about the increasing inability of many of us to tell the difference between game playing in the Western world and real life everywhere else, to transfer the contextual experience of what is essentially white, middle class, American psychotherapeutic activity, human empowerment games. What does this mean? EST, whatever that is, self-choosing behavior. All right, into what for most SM players is a contextual non-experience of brutal and unrelieved global power politics, as the epitome of self-indulgence and unreality. Such a contextual confusion is a sign of nothing but political privilege. A few well-off Americans can afford to play at torture. The model, clothed only in SM bondage, appears on the cover of Vogue, etc., that kind of stuff. Okay, so it comes and goes as a trendy thing, something like wearing camouflage bikinis and fashion bandoliers, something like playing at war when one has never known war. Starting with Desade, the whips and boots, the expensive torture instruments designed and manufactured by highly paid artisans, the aristocratic torturers and voluntarily cringing victims of all the SM games do not represent sexual liberation in any form. They are, in the West, a sad, obsessive acting out of the Christian crucifixion ritual and social class passion. What can be called the decadence imitation of Christ. The SM fixation is not on sensuality, but on stylized coercion and humiliation. The grotesque and deliberate unnaturalness of SM ritual reflects the Christian perversion of the natural birth, life, death process through the total perversion of human sexual experience. The sadistic punisher is Yahweh, man tool. The eternal sufferer is a woman womb, Jesus. All our lives are twisted on the cross of this bizarre distortion of ontological reality. SM game players, like Christ on the cross, are symptoms of our sexual spiritual problem, but certainly not the cure. Almost finished, y'all. All right. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell. In his study of the effects of Protestant Christianity on the working class of England, E.P. Thompson also speaks of how the Methodist Church helped pave the way for the imprisonment of economically uprooted peasants in the urban factories of the Industrial Revolution. When Protestant Reformism merged its Calvinist belief in the complete depravity of most of humankind with the marvelous new profit-making machinery of factory mass production, what could be called capitalist theology was born. The men of wealth, the investors and factory owners were obviously the elect few, morally pre-selected by God for heaven and righteous power. Meanwhile, on earth, the masses of workers, on the other hand, had clearly been divinely prefabricated to suffer via endless hard labor for their innate corruption. To fit the workers to the assembly lines, to chain the many bodies together into functioning parts of an industrial machine, grinding out wealth for the few. Religion was called in, as always, to help program living organisms into a daily condition of productive repression. In England, the Protestant religion was the right hand of the factory owners, forced from their rural cottage industries and herded into crowded, diseased cities. The peasants were forbidden by God to ever again be naturally alive. They were forbidden their seasonal festivals, their dancing, their music, their singing. All those pagan communal rhythmic rites which energized the people and let them know who they were, that they were living beings of a living earth, forbidden all memory and practice of organic rhythm. The people were more readily inured to a life of mechanical rhythm. Thus, the rural English peasant was reprogrammed by the Protestant churches into urban factory workers. The grim effects remain to this day. Pagan music and dance were built on erotic and melancholy modal scales and complexly sensual drum rhythms, which Protestant Christianity especially saw as devil-inspired. It was Protestant moral rationality that finally forced European music into the constricting framework of the major and minor scales and the tick-tock or marching rhythms of 2/4 and 4/4 time. And interestingly, modal scales and pagan rhythms have returned to public life via rock music. And if most young people on earth are now walking around with transistor radios plugged into their brains, it is because rock energy is the global drug of the people, a pagan resuscitation of the body in a disembodied anti-body world. Christian fundamentalists of today, like their historic counterparts, hate rock's sound and lyrics and denounce it as immoral devil music. In fact, rock is pagan music, and its rhythms and lyrics express the memory of the blood. Interesting. Music has a very interesting history, as well as anything else, okay? Any other mundane subject you want to bring up. So, with its dismissal of the worship of Mary, the Protestant Church got rid of the iconic mother altogether, and with all her organic, celebratory links to the earth and the body's rhythmic, ecstatic life. In her place, we have been given the machine. Don't forget to hit that like button on yours, and I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.